He wasn't my father, but he was still part of me.
My father said there was a darkness in Scar that he couldn't escape.
Did anyone else feel like there was something missing from Simba's family story in The Lion King 2? For years, I couldn't shake the feeling that the timeline didn't add up. There seemed to be this unexplained gap after Simba took the throne. After diving into forgotten merchandise, books, and deleted concepts alongside passionate fans who shared my childhood confusion, I discovered something major. Simba and Nala had another son who was supposed to be the heir to the Pride Lands. Today, we're exploring what happened to this forgotten prince, how Scar's shadow mysteriously influenced his disappearance, and why this revelation completely transforms our understanding of the royal succession that led to Kiara and Kovu. Ever watched the Lion King movies back to back and felt something just doesn't add up? There's this weird gap in the Pride Lands timeline that nobody talks about. The first movie ends with Simba defeating Scar and taking his rightful place as king. Then in The Lion King 2, suddenly Kiara is born and presented as the future queen. But wait, how much time passed between these events? A lot, right? So what exactly happened during those missing years? Think about it, Simba was young when he defeated Scar, probably just entering adulthood. Several years should exist between Simba becoming king and Kiara's presentation ceremony. This significant period of Pride Land's history is completely missing from the story. Disney appears to be deliberately avoiding those in-between years, which raises an important question. Why? Here's where things get really interesting. Back in the mid-1990s, right after the massive success of the original film, Disney published a series of books called The 6 New Adventures. These books introduced a character most fans have never seen in the movies, a male cub named Kovu, who was Simba and Nala's firstborn son. Before Kiara was conceived by Disney's creative team, they had already established Simba had a son who was the heir to Pride Rock. The books featured Kovu having adventures around the Pride Lands, learning important lessons from his parents, and being groomed as the future king. Official Disney merchandise included Kovu, plush toys, storybooks, and products clearly identifying him as Simba and Nala's son. He was marketed as an official part of the Lion King family. Then something strange happened. When The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride released in 1998, Kovu had vanished without a trace. There wasn't a single mention of him. Instead, Kiara was presented as Simba and Nala's only child and sole heir to the throne. Kovu's existence was erased completely. The movie offered no explanation for what happened to him or why Simba suddenly had a daughter instead of a son. This situation is like finding a family photo album with several years worth of pictures mysteriously torn out. You know something important happened during that time, but all evidence has been deliberately removed. Most franchises carefully maintain continuity between sequels, ensuring each new story connects logically to previous ones. Yet Disney took this established character with his own book series and merchandise and simply removed him from existence. Years later, Disney released the Lion Guard series, which introduced Kion as Simba and Nala's son and Kiara's younger brother. Even with this perfect opportunity to acknowledge Kovu, they never mentioned him once. They created an entirely new male cub instead of using the character they'd already established. This feels like a deliberate decision to keep Kovu out of the official movie universe. Why would Disney erase a character they had already introduced to the public? Something major must have happened to Kovu within the story world. Something significant and possibly dark that Disney decided they couldn't include in their family-friendly films. The evidence of Kovu's existence is undeniable. The books were official Disney products, not fan fiction. The merchandise was real. Disney actively promoted him as Simba's son for years before The Lion King 2 was released. All this points to one conclusion. Simba and Nala definitely had a son before Kiara, a prince who was the original heir to Pride Rock, whose disappearance changed the entire royal family dynamic and altered the future of the Pride Lands forever. The sudden disappearance of Simba's firstborn son makes a lot more sense when you consider one chilling possibility. Scar's defeat wasn't the end of his revenge plan, but just the beginning. What if the cunning lion who orchestrated Mufasa's death had a much longer game in mind? A game so devastating that it would continue to unfold years after his own death, targeting Simba and the entire royal bloodline that Scar so deeply resented. Think about Scar's personality for a moment. He was calculating, patient, and meticulous. A grandmaster playing chess when everyone else was playing checkers. He carefully manipulated the hyenas, positioning himself as their savior while using them as pawns. He engineered Mufasa's death and managed to convince Simba it was his fault. Someone this strategic wouldn't leave his legacy of revenge to chance. He would plant seeds designed to bloom long after he was gone. In those final moments when the hyenas turned against him after Simba's victory, Scar may not have died immediately. He likely had just enough time to pass final instructions to his most devoted followers. Zira's behavior in the sequel reveals more than simple grief or anger. It demonstrates the disciplined execution of a predetermined plan. She acts with the precision of someone carrying out detailed instructions given before Scar's last breath. The peculiarity of Zira's actions years after Scar's death is striking. She has an elaborate plan involving Kovu infiltrating the Pride and getting close to Kiara. This complexity suggests she's following a blueprint written long before, a strategy that likely began with another target entirely: Simba's firstborn son. The outsiders in the sequel operate with purpose, specifically targeting the royal succession. Their actions represent the next phase of a plan that likely began with whatever happened to Koppa. Like pieces moved across a board by an unseen hand, they execute maneuvers designed years earlier by their fallen leader. Simba's extreme overprotectiveness with Kiara reflects the behavior of a traumatized father. He acts like someone who has already experienced the worst possible loss a parent can face. His fear transcends normal parental concern. It's the reaction of someone who knows firsthand that Scar's influence reached beyond the grave. This theory reveals Scar's psychological brilliance. He understood that killing Simba wouldn't suffice. Simba had already survived one attempt on his life. By targeting his children and his legacy, Scar could inflict a wound that would never heal. Eliminating the firstborn prince would fracture Mufasa's direct lineage permanently, achieving vengeance even from beyond death. Zira's obsession with training Kovu fits perfectly within this broader revenge plot. She's positioning him as a replacement for the prince who should have been king. Her constant drilling into Kovu that he must avenge Scar and take his place in the Pride Lands reveals she's executing a specific directive, not to simply take over, but to literally take his place, as if fulfilling a role in a master plan. The outsiders' coordination suggests they're fulfilling specific orders designed to unfold over years. This explains the mysterious gap in the Lion King timeline that Disney never directly addresses: the period when Scar's most terrible revenge was being executed. The Crown Prince's disappearance wasn't a random tragedy or simple writing decision. It was the first move in a cascade of events orchestrated by a villain whose malevolence extended beyond his lifetime. A posthumous revenge aimed at systematically dismantling the entire royal lineage, beginning with the heir who would have continued Mufasa's legacy. While we've focused on Scar's grand scheme, we haven't answered the most puzzling question about the Forgotten Prince. If Zira was carrying out Scar's orders, why wouldn't she just kill Koppa when she had the chance? The answer reveals a revenge so cruel it makes Mufasa's murder look merciful. Living with the knowledge that your child exists somewhere in the world but is forever beyond your reach creates a wound that never heals, a psychological torture far more devastating than the clean finality of death. After assuming the throne, Simba's joy culminated with the birth of his firstborn son, for a brief, shining moment as Rafiki raised the future king before the gathered animals. The darkness of Scar's reign seemed truly ended. Simba and Nala's beaming faces reflected the promise of a restored circle of life, but in the shadows beyond the celebration, Zira and Scar's most devoted followers were already plotting. Koppa's existence represented everything Scar had despised: Mufasa's bloodline continuing to rule Pride Rock. However, rather than eliminating the cub, Zira had explicit instructions to execute a far more sinister plan. Scar's final orders were to cast the young prince out, to ensure he would grow up alone, confused and forgotten in distant lands where he could never reclaim his birthright. This strategy stemmed from Scar's bitter experience. When he arranged Mufasa's death, he saw how quickly the king became a beloved martyr whose memory inspired others. Simply killing Koppa might transform him into a symbol around which the Pride could rally. Instead, removing him completely from the narrative, making him vanish rather than die, would leave a wound that festered rather than healed. Zira likely orchestrated a situation where Koppa appeared to commit some transgression against Pride law. Perhaps she framed him for endangering others or violating sacred boundaries. Alternatively, she might have staged his death so convincingly that no search party would ever be sent, abandoning the young prince to the wilderness. The exact mechanics remain unclear, but the psychological devastation it caused is evident. Simba never mentions having had another cub before Kiara. This silence speaks volumes. Either he believes his son died, or the trauma runs so deep he cannot bear to acknowledge it. Like father, like son. Just as Simba carried the burden of believing he caused Mufasa's death, now he carries the guilt of failing to protect his own son. The timing of Koppa's disappearance was crucial. The young prince would have been old enough to begin forming memories of his family, but still too young to survive alone or find his way back to Pride Rock. This abandonment during such a vulnerable stage maximized both the prince's suffering and his parents' anguish. This loss transformed Simba from the carefree ruler who reclaimed his kingdom into the anxious, overprotective father we see in The Lion King 2. His extreme measures to keep Kiara safe reflect the behavior of a parent traumatized by a previous devastating loss. The ripple effects extended beyond the royal family. Koppa's banishment fundamentally altered the Pride Land's future by creating a power vacuum in the succession line, a gap that Scar intended Kovu to eventually fill. By removing the legitimate heir, Scar ensured that even in death, his influence would continue to shape the kingdom's destiny. Through this calculated act of cruelty, Scar achieved something far worse than simply ending a life. He shattered a family and forever poisoned what should have been Simba's triumphant return. Scar's manipulation of the Pride Land's future didn't end with removing Koppa. It was just the first step in a scheme so elaborate it continued long after his death. The true purpose behind selecting Kovu as his successor wasn't just about having an heir, it was about creating a perfect replacement for the prince who vanished, ensuring Scar's legacy would be permanently woven into the royal bloodline even if no one remembered his name. When you really think about it, Scar's choice of Kovu has always been puzzling. Throughout the first film, Scar shows no interest in sharing power or grooming a successor. His primary motivation is eliminating Mufasa and Simba to claim the throne for himself. The answer to this inconsistency lies in understanding his true end game, permanent control over the Pride Land's future, even from beyond the grave. Examining Kovu's age reveals something fascinating. He appears to be roughly the same age Koppa would have been had he remained in the Pride Lands. This strategic selection was deliberate. Scar identified Kovu early on, recognizing physical attributes that would develop into the distinctive features we see in The Lion King 2. By selecting a cub born around the same time as the legitimate heir, Scar created a replacement who could seamlessly step into the role that belonged to Simba's firstborn. Scar's plan transcended simple revenge. By instructing Zira to raise Kovu specifically to win Kiara's affections, he ensured his chosen successor would gain legitimate entry into the royal lineage through marriage. This explains Zira's intense focus on both combat training and infiltration tactics, rather than raising an army for direct attack. She followed Scar's detailed instructions for a more elegant coup. Zira's famous line to Kovu, "You will kill Simba and take his place as king," carries deeper meaning. The strategy involved replacing not just Simba, but the entire rightful lineage. Through marriage to Kiara, Kovu would effectively take the position meant for her brother, with their cubs continuing Scar's influence rather than Mufasa's pure bloodline. Kovu's physical appearance served a crucial psychological purpose, his distinctive dark coat and emerging mane resembling Scar's own created visual continuity. In the scene where Simba first confronts adult Kovu, his reaction is visceral. He sees his uncle's ghost. Every time Simba looked at his daughter's mate, he would see echoes of his tormentor, a constant reminder of who was controlling Pride Rock's future. The extensive training Kovu underwent reveals Scar's comprehensive strategy. In scenes showing Zira's instruction, we see Kovu receiving lessons beyond combat, royal protocol, speaking patterns, and leadership skills unnecessary for an assassin, but essential for someone meant to assume throne responsibilities. Zira wasn't raising a killer, she was grooming a king who would carry Scar's vision forward. This explains Zira's extreme reaction when Kovu falls genuinely in love with Kiara. Her rage stems from watching Scar's meticulously crafted plan collapse as Kovu develops his own identity. For Zira, this was the unraveling of years of preparation to position the perfect royal replacement. replacement. Her identity had become completely enmeshed with executing Scar's final commands. In one of the sequel's most revealing moments, Kovu stares at his reflection and sees Scar looking back. This scene takes on new significance when we understand that Kovu was meant to be Koppa's replacement. The identity crisis Kovu experiences involves discovering his entire existence was designed to fill a void created by another cub's removal, raising questions about how deeply Scar's manipulations might have altered Kovu's perception of himself and his unexpected bond with the family he was trained to destroy. That reflection of Scar in the water haunted Kovu, but there's another reflection out there that would shake the very foundation of Pride Rock. When we really think about it, acknowledging a banished heir who could still be alive would completely unravel the carefully constructed peace that now exists in the Pride lands. The question becomes, what might happen if Koppa suddenly reappeared in the present? His return would be like a dormant volcano awakening beneath Pride Rock, powerful, unstoppable, and reshaping the landscape that everyone has come to accept as permanent. Consider the implications of Koppa surviving in the wild all these years. Forced to fend for himself from cubhood, he would have developed survival skills and strengths that pampered pride lions never acquire. Unlike Simba, who had Timon and Pumbaa during his exile, Koppa would have truly been alone, learning the harsh realities of life beyond Pride Rock's protective boundaries. This crucible of survival would forge a very different kind of leader, one hardened by experience rather than trained through royal tradition. And what about his memories? If he was banished young enough, would he even remember his royal heritage? Or would he have fragments, distant recollections of being nuzzled by Nala or carried in Simba's mouth that he couldn't quite piece together? Perhaps somewhere in his consciousness lies the faint memory of a presentation ceremony where all the animals bowed before him as the future king. These shadowy memories might eventually draw him back toward his homeland, pulled by an inexplicable connection. Koppa might have established his own territory by now. Picture a majestic, full-grown lion with Simba's coloring, but a wilder, more untamed presence. He might have gathered followers, formed his own pride in lands far from Pride Rock. He could have cubs who know nothing of their royal lineage or the throne that should rightfully be their father's. The traditional implications are staggering. In lion society, the eldest male offspring is typically the heir presumptive. If Koppa returned, his claim would supersede Kiara's position and potentially invalidate her union with Kovu as the foundation of royal succession. The peaceful merger of the outsiders and Pridelanders would be thrown into question. Would the Pride lands face civil war with different factions supporting different claimants? Imagine the reunion. Simba, patrolling the borders of his kingdom, encounters a strong, unfamiliar lion. Something in the stranger's eyes triggers recognition. "Father," the lion whispers, voice rough from years of disuse. Simba freezes, his heart racing with impossible hope and crushing guilt. Koppa? He manages. The moment hangs between them. Years of separation, loss, and divergent lives condensed into a single breathless pause. Disney's omission of Koppa in The Lion Guard makes sense through this lens. Introducing Kion while acknowledging Koppa would force the narrative to address uncomfortable questions about succession. By simply pretending Koppa never existed in the cinematic universe, Disney maintains a cleaner storyline where Kiara's position remains unquestioned. During initial concept discussions for what eventually became The Lion King 1.5, there were apparently ideas about a mysterious lion returning to challenge Simba's rule. While this didn't make the final film, it suggests Disney's storytellers may have considered exploring Koppa's return. Equally compelling would be Koppa's interaction with siblings he never knew. How would Kiara react to discovering she has an older brother whose existence changes her entire identity as heir? Would Kion's role as leader of the Lion Guard be affected? And perhaps most dramatically, how would Kovu respond to meeting the lion whose place in the succession he was specifically groomed to take? So we've uncovered the shocking truth behind the Pride Land's forgotten history, and everything changes when you realize Scar's influence never truly ended. The banishment of Koppa created ripples through generations affecting every character we thought we knew. Rewatch the films to see the clues everywhere. Simba flinching when Kiara wanders, Zira's eyes narrowing when discussing succession. This transforms the saga into an epic dynasty drama worthy of Shakespeare. The Circle of Life has a gap Disney never filled, making the story infinitely more fascinating. Which hidden detail surprised you most? Share in the comments and see if others spotted what you missed.